First of all, thank you, Lemuel, that you are happy to share your experience as a CISO of Cobham Satcom, a defense and space company in Denmark. And let's start with how you actually integrated compliance into engineering systems. You famously told your auditors of 27001 that you didn't prepare for the certification audit separately. You just showed them what was already there. Can you tell us a little bit how you got to this point and share your experience, how the others could get to the point where the system does the audit work for you? Where do you start? What do you build? How did you go about it?
I always aim that my systems have to be built so that audit work is a byproduct of a delivery. It cannot exist as a separate scramble. And in practice, that means that controls, risk approvals, documents, and pretty much evidences are linked in a system that works. Okay. It has to be in workflows that teams already use or are used to using, and that the platform is able to produce a life chain of evidence rather than asking people to reconstruct later. For me, the design goal is basically traceability, right? So it's all about traceability, repeatability, and explainability. Because an audit should be able to start from a requirement or risk and follow it through decisions, mitigations, approvals, verifications, and see who did what and where and under which policy version. But really, I operated in three different building blocks, right? One is structured objects, like what you guys have, which is all about risk, control requirements, documentation, findings, and actions, and having it existing in a place that's easy for someone to have it visible in. The second part of it is about workflow enforced evidence, right? I don't want to go to an audit and having to, before going to an audit, scramble. Where the heck was this workflow? What the heck did we do? It needs to actually be able to show that the key actions, such as risk acceptances, document approvals, exemption handling, change approvals, or anything, needs to happen in a governed workflow that really automatically captures timestamps, owners, and rationale. Okay. Why is that important? Is really, if a workflow exists, but no one actually knows about it, then it isn't actually controlled and it's not visible. It might exist on paper, but how many times can you actually show that it's repeatable and people actually take it on? And the important part in here was really the continuous audit view, right? Instead of preparing for audits more manually, the platform really should expose what's happening around the system. And that's important, right? Why is it important? Is because the role of the CISO is multifold nowadays. It isn't just about governance versus compliance, but it's become about a lot more than that. Okay. And security controls and controls themselves isn't just a CISO role, but a company role, right? If people do not know what they're non-compliant about, or what people do not know what they need to be compliant about, it's a failure in itself. Awareness is key for everyone in the way we need to operate within an organization.
How do you build that awareness, actually? You said it yourself very well, that it's an organization responsibility. It's not just CISO who does that. How do you, in your organization, increase that awareness, that everybody is aware of the importance of all the steps in the workflow, so that you wouldn't need to chase anybody because it is a part of that workflow?
Okay, that's something where some people start with, okay, let me look at the controls and build awareness of the controls. But then again, people don't, outside of security, sometimes don't really understand controls themselves.
For sure.
So I don't start with training product that we buy. I don't start with, hey, okay, here's pretty much all the products that you can do about awareness. For me, it's talking about behavior and risk, not content or tools, right? And the reason why I start with behaviors is because people have different behaviors and approaches. I always think about being a risk manager that's really old and writing risk for a living. And I don't like that. Okay. I really don't. Risk for me has to be really understandable. Something that people in all aspects of the organization can understand. And that's the biggest problem because every single person understands the risk differently. Everyone's approaches to risk, depending on where you are, is different in the interpretation of the risk. But if you make it so that the people are aware and approach them and get them into that visible mode, what does it mean for me? It gets them a little bit going. So it's all about which behaviors have I got influence to that allows them to understand how they need to work. But the organization here is small enough where I can actually speak to the engineers and tell them how they need to work in a project, what the
Mhm.
risks are if they don't work this way. And that's important for them because for them, a control is a control and it might hinder them from finishing work. But actually, when they actually understand the risk, why we're enforcing these controls and how it relates to them, they're more understanding about how to actually work towards it jointly together. Does that mean I need to have a risk dashboard everywhere? Yes and no. I think a risk dashboard is important to monitor those risks, but also monitor interpretations, but also monitor how we mitigate towards these. But it's as important as knowing the fact that the engineer and understands that the engineer or that the legal person or the operations person or any of your employees are able to mitigate or have an action for those risks. And for that, we really need defining clear objectives around those behaviors, around what their understanding are, and building in a way that is understandable in what they do. We are an engineering heavy organization. Having a tool and having an operation that is heavily focused around the environment helps them understand risks better because you can link the risks to tickets that they're working on. You can link the mitigations to the tickets that they're doing. Those are really important, right? Without it, they all think it's fine.
It's something that we also say that you have to use the tools that the engineers are already using so that you don't introduce overhead for them. You can integrate the risk management into the behavior that they are having already and increasing their awareness about the risks. You can bring these risks into the workflow that they have. You already mentioned risk management and bringing controls and mitigations in place. For a lot of CISOs, risk management and GRC is seen as a separate system where they would manage everything from risk management and the audit readiness and compliance. You chose to embed SoftComply Risk Manager Plus directly into Jira in your organization because, in your opinion, compliance should be treated as an engineering task. Can you elaborate a little bit about the importance of doing that when you want to scale your organization, when you want to grow it, how important that is?
So, why was it important for me to have a more integrated tool rather than a separate tool? Simply put, organizations have to be agile. Okay. Having a separate GRC system and dedicating weeks and weeks just to prepare for an audit is just simply ridiculous in my books. Then I looked and evaluated this organization, right? And this is really important for anyone starting up a security program is look actually what you already have. Behavioral change and cultural change takes longer, right? But if you can somehow embed it in the current and then influence it slowly to where it needs to be, it's actually easier because people start accepting controls, people start accepting a lot of the different things that they have to do. Okay. Doing a speedy implementation, admittedly, will bring a lot of chaos. Okay. And it has been done in the past. But looking at things that they already use, that people are comfortable using, just means that you're guiding them along in a way that allows them to also be part of the journey. So why was it important for me to have something integrated with Jira Simple? Okay, we are an Atlassian house. Okay, Jira for us is a tool that we constantly used for engineers. And because our ISO and our certifications rely on or actually have been scoped to include engineering systems, not just IT systems, so product development, etc. We really wanted that to be integrated within the engineering workflows, right? Because it also gives good practice, right? Whatever you do, if security is embedded enough, then you will have less of a scramble of collecting evidences for certifications, for regulations, for any ISOs or even internal external audits, because it's maintained well and it's maintained as part of your day-to-day workflow.
Can you show us a little bit of how SoftComply Risk Manager Plus, or how you use SoftComply Risk Manager Plus to build central risk structure inside Jira, and how you can map these risks across CMMC, NIS2, ISO 27000 all at once?
So this is the risk register that we have, right? What was vital and key and important for us is have a risk register where everything is linked together and there are mitigations in place where it needs to have. Okay. So what you get to see in here, the risk register, there's an enterprise view, there's a departmental view, there's a reporting view, and there's different types of views that you can have depending on who you are. This is pretty much a risk register and how we shape and form. So you have the risk IDs, pretty much the typical risks, the compliance frameworks are in, the severities, the probability. So you're pretty much tracking not just by compliance frameworks, by severities, but also by values, as well as the current list levels and the actions, as well as the risk and value, and the type of mitigation and what are the mitigations in place. It's either linked to current activities or also mitigating activities that surprisingly what I found is a lot of it seem to go to similar activities, which is actually pretty cool because this just allows me to find out what are the key activities that we need to sponsor, to support, but also ensure that we are always on track or try to be on track. So you can see the mitigation dates, the target severity, risk levels. We've also labeled them as CEO risks, so which ones are most important for the CEO, as well as other items. But there's a few beauties about using it this way in a lot of different ways. This is an example of risk. I know most of it is blurred out, but the way we use it is the fact that we've got assignees, reporters, the due dates, and you can see in here, this is a perfect example where it's now due. And we actually get automated emails when it's due to our SMT and risk owners. Okay. It's also done by risk categories, by departments, the compliance frameworks, the teams, the start dates. And it just gives a lot of visibility to do something about it. But the cool part about all of this as well is the AI part element. So we can actually click on improve risks. And what it does is it enables us to improve descriptions, child work items, link to similar work items, conference content, summarize work items, summarize comments. So the beauty of self-compliant Jira is the fact that you can use the systems that you have with AI. So you can actually improve the risk and how it's written if you don't know how to write risks, but also look at what the mitigating actions is and the subtask. What we always say is that the mitigating actions should be part of a subtask. Because if it's not visible, then we have a problem. And in this example, for example, we can create subtasks or suggested work items that would fulfill the descriptions that we have above. And these are some of the subtasks available. Unfortunately, they're all blurred out. Apologies, but it just gives you suggestions to either link or even create the subtask if they cannot find anything within Jira. The other part is it allows us to actually have more visibility in terms of link work items, and at times it will suggest link work items that are vital for this mitigation or vital for this risks to be fulfilled, to be minimized. So the cool part about the linking and the integration of soft compliant Jira together is that you have an AI tool that helps you write risks, but also helps you suggest the task or helps you find the tasks, but also helps to keep you on track on how to manage the risks.
But your CFO or CEO needs to see only a very high level list of the most critical risks. And would like to see how you're doing the risk reporting with your tools that you were just showing, but also with the help of AI. That'd be really great.
So let's go into building risk reports. It's actually quite easy once you've got a template or once you actually just want to know how you want to build it. Is it simplistic or is it not? So here are a few. What we've actually done and what was desired was a departmental view, a financial view, a life view, and views for the CEO on the enterprise risk register or the CFO or the CISO. Okay, so here is a page that we've written. This is live information view on the current risk register that updates itself. For further information, this is the dashboard. This has actually been embedded in Jira. And these are the risks that the CEO, the CFO, or the CISO care about. So the CEO risks are usually the ones that the CEO cares about and has been ticked as a CEO risk. And it's important for him to look at. Then there's the CFO and the CEO risk, CISO risk. For CFO, it's all about the value of the risk, which is something that we also have as a dashboard on the left-hand side. But we also have, which is part of my thing, is about risk categories, open risk, and the risk register status, risk tables, and co. Even though I sit underneath the CFO side, both it's important, the CFO owns risks with the CEO. It's important for us to ensure that we have visibility in all sides. Okay, security, HR, QA, pretty much all risks that is important for us are in here. What we've also done is actually created a heat map of the risks, as well as the departmental views of the risk, which just allows us to have the stats in full view quite quickly, where we need to focus our intentions at.
So in the pie chart is all the open risks per departments.
What we're actually building right now is a correlation of risk versus open risk, finance versus openness, and the tracking of how many people have updated it. But this is one of the dashboards that you can quickly build on Jira with SoftComply, right? It just makes it easier, right? We've got different views on this. So, for example, how many people have updated risk on a monthly basis? How many people have done tracking on a quarterly basis? What has changed? These dashboards are quite easy to be built within that system. And because it's linked to mitigating actions from an engineering side or from an operations side, it's also quite easy to monitor what's happening to those risks. And that was really important for this organization. Okay. And you can see here the heat map, right? So on the reporting side, it quickly just creates a heat map where we can just click, okay, where we need to focus our things on. In other items, what we've done is also risk by compliance framework. Why is that important? Because this is important because there are risks associated to different compliance frameworks that we obey. Might be NIS2, might be ISO 27K, might be GDPR, CCPA, etc., etc. Those risks has to be visible to an extent that allows people to understand what needs to be done cooperatively. Okay. Because sometimes they wonder, hey, okay, why are we changing this in this organization, but don't actually really understand why. And when they look at risks that we have in the organization, specific to items by department, by quality, by any different sides, it allows them to say, oh, okay, we do have that risk. And what is actually everyone doing for it? And when they click on it and see what the actions are, makes it more interesting. Of course, what we can also do with these is obscure them enough to ensure that sensitive risks within the organization are not shown to the whole entire organization.
Of course. The permission levels have to be right.
Correct. Based on permission, based on location, based on a lot of different things. So there are items within that risk reporting that we do have that no one can see as a result of the permissions that they have.
And your managers, they're happy to go and to look at the compliance report. So do you need to build a slideshow for them?
It's all in here. So it's all
Okay.
embedded. We can actually export it and make it all pretty. But on a day-to-day view, it's there, right? What risks is assigned to me? What where do I need to focus on? What is actually the business priority? Right? So they can actually see, okay, the business has got a massive risk for this. Did not know that. Oh, okay, it's linked to my project, or it's linked to the activities within my project. Oh, since when is that? It just gives them that curiosity, but also understanding that some of the things they're actually doing help and enable mitigate the risks they have within an organization.
I thought of wrapping up with asking you for suggestions to other CISOs out there whose engineering teams are already using Jira and Confluence, and how to help automate audit readiness and compliance.
Okay, so the questions I always ask myself is, how can I support the business and how can I make sure that there are controls in place to keep us secure? Okay. It's without the business, have no job, right? But without the compliance and security controls in place, then we have a problem. All right. So it's having to find a balance that works for the organization and the culture they have. Okay. So for us, what was really important and what you have to think about yourself is there's so many controls out there, but it's the simple foundations that are ensuring that the way we build an organization allows us to be kept secure. I always give the analogy of a house where security is just the controls of how to build a house properly, right? And how to get a living room, how to not live in a one single room out of a supposed 4-bed house. Ensuring what you actually have in there and if it's feasible to work with is really important because slight changes or even major changes within an organization will prevent people from working. What's most important for me is ensuring that we have tools that are able to support the business to do work, but also ensuring visibility, risk minimization, and risk management within the organization. Okay. And I always hate when people say security is all about compliance, and it do. Security is more than compliance. But ensuring that we're compliant, but also secure enough is really important. And at times, it is all about interoperability and integration, right? If it disrupts workflows, it disrupts the business from working, even for 2-3 weeks, that disrupts them from working in key projects when you go for audits. What's really important is ensuring that you have the right tool sets and the right cultures in place and behaviors in place that allows you to not be as disruptive, but also minimizes the risk across and make sure that it's visible to everyone.
Thank you so much, Lemuel. I like the way you said that also it's not just a compliance issue or something that you should look at when the audits are coming, because you actually need it for your business. You can't run a business if you're not secure. If there's anything more that you would like to add to CISOs, like other CISOs, that they would definitely need to think about, something that you have thought back and went, oh, I wish I did that beforehand, or prepared something or looked into something. If there's any suggestion or some key takeaway for other CISOs out there.
There's a lot of different maturities across the organization, wherever you go, right? And what I expected when I started this role was just basically, okay, cool, did low maturity, I'll get them in, I'll get them ISO. I expect them to at least have some minors and majors, right? But what I actually learned from the experiences I had in the past, especially from CISOs that are very good friends, from friends that have worked in security purely because I met them at Oxford. So I have a friend who worked with me who came in and improved the security level rapidly within a year by cleverly using tools that are either existing or not existing within the organization. And all he did was just looked at the organization and said, okay, these are the ones that are embedded. These are the ones that are not embedded, but these little tiny changes will allow us to have a significant gain. Okay. And that's from his experience. It's not from tools that will say, hey, we will identify your risks and these are the key things that you need to look at. No, because sometimes what a tool will tell you on what to focus on sometimes isn't the right for the organization because it doesn't have the contextual information of the organization. And I have known CISOs that rely on those tools to sell to the board why they need a security program and why they need to do this. But then have the tools got contextual information about the organization? Have the tools got all the compliance frameworks that they have to go to? And has the tool got enough information available that enable cultural change but enforce security within that change, right?
That makes perfect
And
sense. So
this is
you start from what the organization has and build on top of that.
correct. And that's really important purely because when you have a security role, regardless if it's CISO, head of security, or whatever, if you don't look at the organization that you're working with and identify which ones are actually the easy wins based on what you have, rather than a maturity score, then you have a problem. In this organization, I found that they do have security practices, but not actively encouraged. And having those people that are just spending time encouraging and empowering them created bigger cultural changes and cultural shifts than what I can do by changing or improving 3 different tools that a tool tells me. Okay, fine, it minimizes the risk for ransomware occur, but it doesn't give impactful change to the organization and how the organization works. And that's the whole entire behavioral change that's needed. Because when you have the behavioral change that you want or the understanding, implementing something like such as ISO becomes more simple. I was pleasantly surprised in the fact that I was prepared for the ISO to have a lot of majors and minors to not really having a major minor at all. The auditor was saying that we were quite mature in our risk management practices, in security monitoring practices, in our software development practices, and in our further development practices that he thought that was embedded within 5 years of work. And the reality of the matter is, I think it only took us for about 6 months
It's
from the
amazing.
time I started to what time we got it.
Well done. Well,
It really is. It's a cultural change, but a behavioral change. And understanding from the organization what really needs to be done. And here, communication is key. And finding the people that are outside of your control that can also communicate, empowering them that they do have a voice, and empowering the people around that they do have a voice and a say, but also understanding why we have to do it this way.
I
And
wanted to touch upon one more thing that you showed very briefly when
mm,
you shared the screen, which was Robo and building with or getting suggestions with AI. And I wanted to ask you, what are the foundations, in your opinion, of secure adoption of AI in an organization? How would you say companies that are safety critical and regulated, that they would also feel that, okay, the AI that we are using, the extent we are using it to is okay and it is secure?
for us, it always has to have a human-centric design and oversight, right? So we need as humans to retain meaningful control, right? No, I'm going to preach to the choir here, but AI really should act as a decision support layer, human in the loop or human on the loop mechanisms that allows operators to review, delay, or override AI actions. Reason being, AI can be a helpful tool to give you information, right? And I always say is if it gives you information, just make sure it doesn't hallucinate by allowing you to have references and that you are able to click on it. Okay. Because when you have that, it just allows you to be that human on the loop and ensure that whatever is being spat out is actually correct.
So is there a case that if you have the structured data, it minimizes also the risk of AI hallucinating?
Correct. So the more structured data is, and the more it can read, okay, risk equals this, for example, which is relevant to you guys, but description equals this, it becomes less. The more chaotic the data is, at times it can be very confusing for the AI for interpretation reasons. That's why we have to have a human on the loop, right? The other parts of all of this is all about because we need to ensure that there's a clear chain of ownership and processing because we cannot point at the AI and say the AI did it. Okay. We had to point out ourselves or something that allows us to kind of find the fault. Okay. Because the AI that you have is as good as for the data outcomes you have. Now, for regulated industry, the use of AI becomes very complicated. And in this sense, the guidelines that we need has to evolve or has to be part of the relevant legislative frameworks out there. So what is important for us was ensuring communication to our users where AI can be used and where AI cannot be used, but also stupid-proofing it enough that there's some access control measures in place or regulatory measures in place that doesn't allow that to happen for them. Okay, so literally what I have done, okay, and what we're planning to do is just have AI be a separate human identity because it's easier to control.
Like,
Yeah. But also the other part is you always need to have a human in the loop. Literally, whatever AI does cannot be something that a human hasn't reviewed.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And if you have the structured data, like you said yourself as well, that's much easier for AI to suggest these things that are already there in the data.
I actually agree with that.
Thank you so much. It was really cool. It's always cool to talk to you and to hear your experience and how you build things and so fast. And also to that level of auditor satisfaction and compliments, if
Yeah.
you will. It's not often that I hear these stories of auditors going, there's nothing I can say. It's perfect.
Literally, like we made an announcement last year. He actually said 0 minus 0 majors. The amount of risk and audits I ended up having and written pretty much everything what's out there to ensuring that everything's visible it's an ease, right? You can't exist in an organization, come in and just create a transformation and then make sure that they comply. Use the tools that you have, use everything that is in there, and try and figure out if you can do it and if not. And make changes at things where it is possible to make a change or whether it's a control failure. If it's a complete control failure, you're entitled to make a change. If it's not, and it's just slight procedural or process changes or a tool use change, use what you have because they got used to it already, and then tell them how they're failing. And that was important. Cool. Now my CEO.
That's a great segue.
I will talk to you in a bit. Okay.
Thank you so much, Lemuel. Thanks.
Okay. See you in a bit. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Marion.